The canon is the body of work which is highly regarded within a society. These works are thought of as important and influential. The Irish canon in the 20th century is primarily male and gives the impression that women did not write and create much literary work during this period. But this isn't true. Many figures have been forgotten and not given the stage in the same breath their male counterparts have, and many figures' works have gone out of print, making retrieving scripts difficult. The aim of this video essay is to examine myth-making in the female body, while also drawing light upon a figure whose work has gone unnoticed. An artist who had to grapple with the myths representing her as she lived, that she didn't identify with, and her way of creating art from it.
Every society creates myths in an attempt to freeze time and reaffirm a unified narrative of the past which supports the dominant ideology of the day. In mythologies, Roland Barthes reveals myth's capacity to naturalize the ideology of the dominant order. Myth has the task of giving a historical intention, a natural justification, and making contingency appear eternal. Irish theatre has long been steeped in mythic narratives, an obsession which has hindered women's participation in the cultural fabric of society through the perpetuation of idealized and determinalized tropes of femininity. Yet, women theatre makers have persistently and imaginatively engaged with and rewritten these icons to refuse this silence. The inheritance of the myth of woman as a nation is addressed by the poet Evan Boland. What I found was a rhetoric of imagery which alienated me, a fusion of the national and the feminine which simplified both. Both are patriarchal constructs which deny the expression of woman's subjectivity and renounce their bodies.
The gendered narrative of representing women as land can be traced back to the sovereignty figure, a pagan goddess of the land who conferred prosperity on a people through her union with their king. This figure had several functions, representing war, fertility, sex, and victory, but different aspects were employed and emphasized during different historical periods. The Morrigan, a goddess of war, had a dominant position in early Irish literature, but this figure and her sexual function was later shunned in favour of the Aisling figure. This poetic convention flourished in the 18th century in response to the imposition of British rule following 17th century colonisation. The narrative follows the dream convention as the poet falls asleep and has a dream vision of a beautiful lady who tells him she is Ireland. However, the Aisling was no longer a powerful or practical goddess, but a weak, melancholy maiden, romanticised and unreal. In the 19th century, it was the more defiant figure of the Shan van Vocht, the poor old woman, who was favoured and appeared in political ballads. The representation of women in myth during the early years of the 20th century Ireland was largely shaped by the political agenda of emergent cultural nationalism. The choice of myth was influenced by the need to represent Ireland's struggle for independence. This is epitomised in W.B. Yeats and Lady Gregory's 1902 play Kathleen Ní Shúilleán, in which the eponymous Kathleen is the symbolic mother nation figure who is dependent on the actions of men and serves to inspire them. The enduring trope of Mother Ireland has defined women's bodies as the terrain over which power has been contested, while at the same time erasing the realities of their corporal experiences. The stultifying legacy of idealized myths has obstructed women's cultural engagement to confinement to iconicity. Women in Irish theatre in the 20th and 21st centuries have employed mythic narratives to expose the gap between idealized myths of femininity and women's lived realities. The myth of the beautiful dead woman is central to the traditional folktale Bluebeard, in which he murders his wives and then preserves their corpses in a locked room. The tale is the source for Mary Davenport O'Neill's ballet poem Bluebeard, which premiered in the Abbey Theatre on 25th of July 1933, and its key features resonate powerfully with the conservatism
of 1930s Ireland. The period was notable for the severe curtailment of women's ability to participate in public life and the attendant drive to contain their bodies. The 1937 Constitution enshrined a woman's role as a mother and defined her place through her life within the home.
In the folktale, women are punished through death and their desires are contained in Bluebeard's locked room while his are fulfilled. When Bluebeard's most recent wife is to be left alone in his castle, he hands her a set of keys and issues her with strict instructions not to go into a forbidden room. However, her curiosity gets the better of her, and she is horrified to discover a bloody chamber with the corpses of Bluebeard's previous wives. When Bluebeard returns to his castle, he declares that he will punish her by killing her and placing her in the room with the dead wives. What we find in O'Neill's work is a grappling between appearances and lived experience. Life is fluid, and attempts to contain and preserve a way of being merely bring destruction. In O'Neill's play, Bluebeard's bloody chamber is the ultimate architecture of containment, as the threat of female sexuality and decay is contained within his beautifully preserved corpses, 6 mummy women in 6 long glass boxes. O'Neill describes how in Bluebeard she tried to express the conflict between beauty and life destroying without respite the beauty it has created. She goes on to explain that Bluebeard rates beauty above life, and we discover that his desire to arrest decay is made possible by old Jasper's drug, a drug that kills all change and all decay. It fixes beauty for 10,000 years.
A feminist reading of the play enables us to posit this conflict as the gap between idealized myths of femininity and women's material realities. The climax of the play is potentially a bitter reflection on the overwhelming lack of opportunity and agency for women in 1930s Ireland. Paradoxically, enervation and stagnation animate Bluebeard. These states preempt the long-lasting impact that decades of the Free State would have on women's cultural participation and representation. In O'Neill's poetry, she continues the theme of stagnation and decay. You dead women in your graves, you made beauty long ago, but in ceasing waters flow, and great unattending waves carry all things that we know. And they wither and grow old. Are you nothing now but mould, cold and brown? You who were more bright than a crown, and amethyst and emerald, and all that gorgeous red and yellow gold.